Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. This is Diana Arias from the Community Technical Assistance Center and Managed Care Technical Assistance Center of New York State. This is the third webinar in our new four-part series called Creating Successful Group Experiences. This series was created by our clinical team and Community Collaborative Board here at CTAC to help providers identify ways to engage in creative and dynamic ways to support and empower their participants within a group setting. In this overall series, we will have webinars on engaging prospective clients in group participation, group process, group facilitation, and group outcomes and performance indicators. You can access the full listing of the series on the CTAC website at ctac.org. In today's webinar, providers will learn about an effective group facilitation method called ROPES. This method provides a comprehensive yet efficient model useful for an organized and goal-oriented group to keep on track with each session. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to orient everyone to the WebEx system so you know how to participate in today's event. Please note that upon joining the webinar, you have been placed on mute to avoid any background noises that may distract others from listening to the presentation today. If you come across any technical issues during today's event, please chat to the host who will be able to assist you. You will have the opportunity to submit questions for the Q&A portion of today's presentation by utilizing the chat box feature, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. If it is not visible, click the dialog bubble on the top right toolbar and it should appear. In order to ensure that we are able to answer as many questions as time permits, we are requesting that you send in your questions at any point during the webinar, and we will address them during the Q&A portion. Lastly, if you are joining us by phone, you will not be able to hear the audio from the video clips, excuse me. We are very excited to have Dr. Tony Salerno with us today for the title presentation, Facilitation Utilizing Ropes. Once again, thank you for joining us, and at this time I will turn it over to Tony.
Great, thanks a lot, Diana. Welcome, everyone. This is a topic that I love to talk about, and part of it is, I've been in the field a long time, about 30 years with the Office of Mental Health, and when I was in day hospital working clinics, we had a very strong group model. And I must tell you that for many years I was flying by the seat of my pants. I really wasn't getting much, I didn't get much training in the area of how do you really facilitate a group effectively. And then particularly for individuals like adults with serious mental illness or significant substance abuse, how do you design a program and how do you ensure that every person in the group is actually benefiting from it? So I think it was a big challenge. And then over the years, my work with other colleagues and some of my work with folks at Boston University, we began to really try and take a hard look at, can we establish some type of a framework that would be very practical, easy to understand, make a lot of common sense, align with the best practices in adult education. That's something we could share with others who would also be struggling with groups. And so this is what I'm here to really share with you. And I love doing this because I think that if you're going to be running a group that's theme-centered, that's a structured, where you have a particular, area of focus in the group, that you have an opportunity perhaps to practice this particular approach and to see whether or not it really, works for you and works for the clients that you serve. So let's get on with this. Let me just go to the next slide. So here's the agenda, is basically this whole issue of, what is it about groups that is important, because that will also guide you in thinking about how you have to establish a certain kind of climate within a group and to build on the benefits that groups have. The challenge of the work, the types of groups, and really in many ways the common pitfalls of groups so that you may recognize in the same way that I did some of these challenges. And then this is really designed for when you're using a theme-centered, structured, curriculum-based group. One that I had worked on for many years was Wellness Self-Management, Wellness Self-Management Plus, but it could be any particular program or group where you have a specific theme and that there's information that you want to impart and also personalize it for each individual. And then the ROPES model, and I'll go into the details around what that is. So you may have seen this before, but I think it's important to remind ourselves that what are the real benefits of running a group where there's safety, where it effectively engages individuals, where people feel like they're part of a cohesive team. And it really can be very powerful when the group is run well. If there are really challenging difficulties, and some that I've run, which I wish I could take that back, where I think would perhaps actually cause more harm than good. So doing this well is like really important because it can build on the sense of the universality where people don't feel alone, and the issue of stigma, the social emotional support from others. It's really a way to try out new behaviors that are in a kind of a safe and a safe manner. There's also an opportunity in groups where people do a lot of social observational learning from each other. There's a sense of building hope and confidence because individuals within the group, there'll be many opportunities where people can share some of the positive steps that they've made in their lives. It's also a chance for corrective experiences, opportunity for people to receive some feedback on, the ways of thinking or believing or behaving. And then the power of peers, and don't underestimate this, the power of peers to influence others. So those are some of the important purposes, really, of a group. But there are challenges, as you already know. It's a high-risk situation, right? When you're ever in the presence of a social situation, there is a possibility where you can feel embarrassed, where you might be put down, where you might feel odd, where you could be rejected. I mean, these are all concerns in any kind of a social environment, and groups certainly are that. So safety and trust is paramount. There's also a lot of different experiences, background knowledge of the people in the group. So, gee, how do I make this group something that is relevant and aligned with what's important to each person in the group? Well, that's a tough challenge. And I think when we developed the ropes approach was one way of trying to get at this, so that it's personalized and at the same time you're able to focus on a specific theme. How does each person benefit from the group? That's really tough. The group members have different readiness around learning, around their learning style. Oftentimes you, as well as I, in the many groups that I used to run, which was, I averaged about 10 groups a week for about 9 years, working in day programs and in clinics. So I've run every group the wrong way, and I've also had a chance to really implement a group framework that just changed my whole experience. I used to look forward to groups, and so did the clients in my group. I think part of it is we were able to create that sort of safety, but we had a framework in mind that helped to promote that, and that's what I'm going to share with you guys today. And then people stop and they start at various points. You have open groups, closed groups, so you get it, that this is not so easy. And unless you've, maybe your experience might be a little different, but most of the time when I'm speaking to social workers and nurses and psychologists and psychiatrists and others in the mental health field or substance abuse field, when I ask, well, did you ever get any training on how do you kind of organize and facilitate a group where the individuals, may be struggling with, some mental health issues, emotional issues, substance use issues, and the vast majority tell me, gee, I just have not had that. I'm just kind of pretty much winging it a lot of the time. Well, we don't want you to wing it. We'd like you to have a framework that would help to guide you and be a benefit to the clients. Okay, so there are different types of groups, but what I want to really focus on today is when there is a theme. I've run process groups. That means you don't go in there with a particular theme in mind. You just kind of open it up to the group, and you build on whatever it is that emerges from the group organically. This approach that I'm going to share with you is not based on running process groups. It's really based on running groups where there is a focused theme. Often you're using handouts or using some curriculum-based kind of material where there is really a very strong educational component. So I just want to sort of make sure that I qualify what I'm going to be sharing and what it's meant to really address. Okay, so I'm just going to go on just in the interest of time. I want to make sure that we get to the heart of the matter. Okay, so theme-centered groups, again, the membership is based on the interest and expressed need of participants. There's a particular problem or concern that is shared by the people in the group. The focus of discussion is aligned with the theme, and it's mostly verbal conversation in addition to the use of informational materials or some learning exercises. And some examples of a theme-centered group is something like a stress management group, current events group, healthy living, how to get a job, steps to a sober lifestyle, skills-oriented groups. I mean, we can kind of go on and on and on. The work that I've done in New York State, anyway, was focused on developing wellness self-management types of curricula, and that was really focused on helping people to really understand and to better manage symptoms associated with a mental health difficulty or with substance use issues. Okay, so let me just share something with you around a good group. I wish I had known this way back when I was running, 9, 10, 11 groups a week for many, many years in a day program and clinic back in 1980s, but I wasn't aware of this. And this is a work by someone named Ruth Cohn, which hardly anybody knows who she is. She basically came to New York. She basically had a very strong psychoanalytic, background, but was very interested in trying to create groups that worked well. And she came up with this idea that a really well-designed group, that there's a dynamic balance between the I, the we, and the it. And I'll explain a little bit what that meant. It made a lot of sense to me, and then when I learned this, I started to think about and really behave in the groups a little bit differently. So in dynamic sort of balance, the principle is that there's the I, that is the individual. So the individuals have particular interests and particular concerns that really represents each individual in a group. Then there's the group, which is the shared experience, right? This is the we, that even though we are individuals and have some unique kinds of experiences, we also have shared experiences. And then there's the theme itself, that is the it, that's the information, and it exists outside of the individual's experience or the collective experience. So if you're talking about stress management, there's actually information about some of the best strategies. One is there's information about what stress is, how it affects people, strategies that they can use in order to address it. So there's information that exists outside of the individuals, and that's what we refer to as the it. And when they're in balance, meaning if you were to observe a group and you said to yourself, how much of the conversation in this group is basically individuals? And if it's all individuals, everybody says, well, I did this and I feel this and that person does another thing. No one's ever actually identifying shared experiences, and they're not really talking about the topic so much. It's kind of shifted too much to each individual kind of talking about their own thing, but not really identifying the shared experiences, which is very powerful for group cohesion, and then not really spending much time kind of learning things outside of their own particular experience. So whenever one side dominates, whenever the theme dominates, then it feels kind of cold. It's kind of more of a classroom kind of a thing. Well, we're talking about stress management, but no one's talking about it in terms of their own lives. They're not looking at the shared experiences. It's just talking about the it. It's kind of cold, right? Very academic. If we have just we experiences, like everybody, no one's really wanting to kind of stand out. There's too much conformity. Everybody's kind of, yeah, I feel that way. Yes, I feel that way. And you get a sense of like, gee, no one wants to really share the differences that they have in terms of their experiences. Then it's shifted too much to like groupthink. The group is just afraid for individuals to express sort of like their own unique identity in a group. That is not good. And so the idea here is if you're observing a group, if there's a balance, that means people are talking about their individual experience, they're also talking about their shared experience, and they're also learning about the theme. When that's generally in equal balance, now you got something really kicking. That is a powerful group. And so I just wanted to share that with you. I have found it to be a really very, very helpful concept. So here's just basically a little bit more detail around if it's all about the I, then people really don't understand the universality and the shared experiences. And then the we, as I mentioned, too much on groupthink. And then if you're not really looking at learning about a topic, whether it's understanding what stress is, what are the steps involved in getting a job, if you're focusing on understanding mental health symptoms and treatments for various symptoms, there's information out there. And that becomes part of the whole theme and focus. But you just can't lecture folks or just give them a lot of information. I've certainly observed and supervised many, many, many folks across many programs, and I've observed people working very, very hard, but kind of falling into certain traps. And these are the traps I want to share with you. These are very common dilemmas. So one dilemma is the meandering group. I don't know if you run groups like this. I certainly have. That is, wow, we kind of lost sight of what the focus of this group is. We're going from this topic, then flitting to another topic, then somebody brings up another topic. It's kind of like, gee, we lost focus. And that can very easily happen unless you have a specific plan and a specific framework to ensure that you don't get off track. So that's one dilemma. The other is the monopolized group. Now, sometimes you'll have individuals who would really have a lot on their mind. They either have some pressing issues or concerns, and they kind of draw a lot of the attention to themselves, right? And that's so often a problem. And people try all different strategies to try to address that, right? You kind of like get the person back on track. You kind of want to open it up to other people. So you can do all sorts of things, but sometimes the person just keeps bringing it back, you know, to themselves. And you're getting annoyed. The rest of the group members are getting annoyed and frustrated. And that can easily, you know, happen in a group. And you find yourself sometimes having to either confront the person, or you're spending a lot of time having to deal with the individual who is, you know, drawing a lot of attention and really doesn't seem to be ready to share space like with others. So I'm not going to talk about like specific techniques to deal with it, but a framework that if you use the ropes type of approach, you are so much less likely to have these issues come up at all. And that's really the goal, is to not have to deal with a pitfall or a problem, but to actually, you know, prevent it from actually emerging or really reducing the likelihood that it would emerge. So that's another dilemma. Maybe you have seen this. Now, this is the most common issue that happens in a group. You ask a question, somebody responds to it or brings up an issue, and because we've done individual therapy 1,000 times more than we've done perhaps groups, we are drawn to that. And a group can easily turn into individual therapy with an audience group. I've run these groups, and it's not helpful because basically, you know, it's really individual therapy, and others are just kind of watching it. And people kind of feel a little frustrated with that. They can start tuning out because it doesn't seem to have anything to do with them. Or you'll have the situation where someone says, well, last week you spent a lot of time on Joe, and now this week I want you to spend a lot of time on me. And after a while, the whole point of the group gets lost. So that's something to be very, very conscious of. I've slipped into this one more times than I'd want to admit. Then you can do it with a number of people, the multiple individuals. Maybe you spent 15, 20 minutes with Joe, and then it's 20 minutes with Mary, and really that is not the point of a group, and how to avoid that kind of thing. Then you may have been in groups that's like pulling teeth. The group leader is doing most of the talking, right? Forget about a dynamic balance. It's completely out of whack. It's the group leader is doing everything but standing on their head to kind of get folks like engaged and involved. So you may have experienced that. I certainly have. I've done lecturing groups, and I've seen this many times. If you're really into a topic where you can find yourself really sermonizing to the group members, you almost want to hear an amen at the end of the group. And then you have, well, the group has just gone completely off the rails, and I just hope to survive this group. Okay. And then there's sometimes the filler. Look, I don't care what we talk about here. We just want to get through this thing, and anything that will help us get through this group will be fine with me. So I got these basically just by reflecting on my own experience. You know, this is not like in the literature. This is like, gee, I just step back and think about the various things that have happened in groups that I was running. And these are some of the things that I've experienced, and perhaps you've experienced some of these. So I was very motivated to try to figure out how the heck are we going to avoid this stuff. And the ropes was one way that really was helping. So I'm going to go past these that got into a little bit more detail. I want to make sure we give ourselves time. So I also want to make sure you have time to ask any questions. So how can we avoid these kinds of pitfalls? So that was my challenge as well, because there were times I really dreaded going to a group. I was so glad when the group was canceled. And certainly I don't want to feel that way. And if I'm kind of dreading it, maybe the clients are dreading it as well. And so one issue is, so how do I create this kind of safe group where there's a focus and that everyone has an opportunity to really benefit in their own unique way, but at the same time understand our shared experiences and learn something. So having clear ground rules, that's pretty important because you want to create that safety in the group. Without it, you haven't got anything. So that's a key piece. So I had to really work on that, and as much as possible, you have the group members develop those ground rules, sometimes posting it in the group, having people initial the posting in the group. So this is like, it's a way of saying how we're going to be here with each other. And it's a commitment that everyone makes to everybody else in the group. That my job is to create an environment in which we all feel safe, that when people aren't being put down, that we focus on, you know, the topic that we're here to focus on, and, you know, those sorts of, and we don't disrupt anybody's learning, in the group. So that's a very important thing, and that goes you a long way in trying to address some of this pitfall, but that's not enough. And the structure, the focus, and engaging material also goes a long way. But you need to have a clear and transparent, easy to follow format, a framework, and that's what ROPES really is designed to do. But let me just start with those three areas, right? So the ground rules, I'm sure you guys are familiar with this, but I'm also impressed with when I go in to do some observations with folks running groups from, you name it, physical health groups, chronic disease management, to, dealing with psychosis kind of thing, and everything in between. Is oftentimes I have seen where folks really didn't pay too much attention to this whole notion of ground rules, and everyone understanding it and everyone being involved in actually developing those ground rules, coming really from the group members. So you establish them early on the process, and it is essential to engage folks really as establishing their ground rules. And I think I would suggest posting the ground rules. And in some cases, I've seen some groups where they've kind of taken this and they just have folks sign the sheet that's literally posted somewhere. And it's kind of their way of saying, I'm holding myself accountable, and we hold each other accountable for creating the kind of environment we want so people can learn. But they're not enough, right? So the whole idea of ROPES that I'll be getting into is, so here are the things we needed to do. Whatever model we came up with, it had to promote safety and trust, so it had to have that check off. It has to create an opportunity for each person in the group to personalize it to their own experience. This is a huge challenge. I just want you to imagine if somebody from Medicaid was sitting in on your group, or anybody who's a payer, and you have 8 people in your group, and they're paying $15 for each person in that group, and the auditor is sitting there with you, and you're running the group. And the auditor is going to be looking for, I want to see why I should be spending $15 on each of these clients here. Okay, so I want to make sure, how does this benefit Joe? How does this benefit Mary? How does this benefit Sam? And because I'm paying for each one of them. And so that really means the challenge of, if this is a individual therapy and audience group, well, I'm not going to pay for the other 7. I'll maybe pay for the person you had involved in the individual therapy. If no one seemed to identify, the way they connect to the particular topic, then I'm not paying anybody. So thankfully, you don't have auditors in our groups. But in many ways, we would have a big challenge. And so how do we do that? How do we ensure that each person is benefiting? We have to make sure it's very clear and transparent. How does it keep people on track? Is it empowering of folks in there? Do people feel like they're not just like sitting and being lectured to, but that they really can shape the way this goes and to benefit from it? The shared decision-making helps participants to remember and revisit the main ideas. An opportunity to continue or apply their learning. How about that? Group work is not about developing very effective group members or very strongly, participants in a group. That's not the point of a group. A group isn't to create and shape good group members. It's to help people learn in a way that they can then apply in their own lives and have the opportunity to do so. And then it should be a very common-sensible and format, which is another piece that I want to focus on. So, and how not to do training on group skills. You may have gotten some of this. I have been in programs where we've got this big binder. So we want you to avoid this, right? So I'm back from training. I got a big binder. The training is already forgotten, but the binder will last forever. And it's a living monument to temporary knowledge. The point I want to make is I have binders in my office right now that I'm looking at that I got about 30 years ago. And the last time I looked at that binder was about 30 years ago. So part of the issue is sometimes we're overloaded. We just have too much information and making things too complex. It's the killer. It's the killer of learning and people being able to apply. So the whole notion of ROPES is we don't give you a binder. When I do the training face-to-face, you don't get a binder. You get a one-page laminate. That is it. Your entire training guide is a one-page laminate back and front. And the point I'm trying to make is that it's really important for us to have these streamlined, easy to understand, but still meaningful and helpful approach. So you don't have to get a master's degree in group work or go through many of the trainings I did on the dynamics of group work, which I spent tons and tons of hours, but I must tell you, didn't really amount to very much when it came to how do I work with individuals, you know, who are struggling with mental health and substance use problems and have a great deal of needs, who have also maybe some learning challenges as well because of either distractibility or some cognitive sorts of light deficits or whatever it might be, the very common issues that we see with individuals who are struggling with mental health or substance use issues. Okay, so here I'm going to share with you this particular approach. Now, I kid a little bit. I refer to this as the multiphasic, temporally sequential, tripartite group pedagogical process. And it's kind of like tongue-in-cheek, but it's this model, which if you actually broke it down, it's exactly what ROPES does. But I like to kid a little bit, and so you can refer to this as the MPT-STPGPP, you know, model, because it is multiphasic, it is temporally sequential, and it's a three-part process. So, so let me go on to share that with you. So what's the key elements? So this is how important it is to just be simplified. The three major elements of a group, it really is, I mean, it may seem simple to you guys, but I'm telling you, it's been the most helpful way for me to conceptualize groups. One is, there's a beginning to a group. So what do you do in the beginning of a group? And then, believe it or not, there's also a middle of a group. And you probably guessed the next part, right, is how do you end a group? And I don't think we've got to get fancier than that. Is just what is a helpful beginning that kind of gets learners ready to engage and participate in the group? And then what do we do at the heart of the group in terms of the information, the people sharing, responding to key questions and sharing with each other? And then how do you kind of end a group so it feels like we had a satisfying learning experience, right, that helps to reinforce it? So that's it. It shouldn't get any more complicated than that. Now I'll go into some of the, you know, what goes on in the beginning, middle, and an end of a group. So this is the whole piece of it. So let me share with you sort of the big picture at this point. So the ROPES, the R-O-P-E-S, stands for a particular part of a group process. The R and the O, it really represents the beginning of a group. So a really well-established group is one in which there's a review and an overview process, and I'll go into details of what that is. In the middle, tend to think of this as the tell, show, and the do in a group. A good learning experience includes, you know, sharing information, telling people reading about the theme or the topic, then having some sort of show, which could be in the form of either role play, or you're watching a video clip, or a person is completing a checklist, or you are demonstrating a particular skill. It's just a way of going from the telling, which is like ideas, to sort of showing. Let me give you an example of what we mean by ways that people learn how to deal with stress. And if you gave someone a checklist on 10 different ways to deal with stress, that's a show. That's a show. And then if you ask people to complete that, then you're getting into now people kind of, you know, acting on that. And then, but also not just acting on information in the group, which is an important do, but the next do is to think about how they could apply what they learned in their lives, right, which is really the critical piece here. And then the summary, like so, and so doing it in your real life is the exercise part. That's the E. That means now you at least have an opportunity to think about, gee, I learned a few things here, so it's going to be up to me to decide whether this is important, whether I want to continue my learning, whether I want to apply what I've learned, you know, during the week. That's really going to be up to each group member. There's no way that you can force or coerce or pressure somebody into taking some action steps related to the particular theme that you've been focusing on, which is the whole purpose of a group anyway, is to give people increased knowledge, skill, strategies, so that they can apply what they've learned in a way that works for them in their day-to-day life. And then how do you end a group? What do you do with the summary, right? And the summary is not like, okay, I'll see you guys next week. that's really not what we mean by an effective summary. So let me just make sure you guys have like the big picture here of ropes really incorporates a beginning, middle, and end of a group process. So let's go in the beginning first. The beginning really consists of doing a review and an overview. So what's the point of a review and the overview? And I can't tell you how often folks skip this. Even when I've trained folks, and, you know, they've gone through a whole thing, and then I'm sitting in a group and just, you know, provide some more support to folks. I often have seen a little bit more than I was hoping. Folks sometimes skip this section. I think it's a pretty important one. What's the point of it? Continuity and follow-up from the previous lesson, and the process of engaging, orienting, and motivating learners about the topic, right? That's pretty important, is preparing. You can't just jump into a topic. It's kind of like trying to set the stage. You want to get people to understand what the heck this is, why would this even be important, why should I bother putting time and energy into learning this particular topic for today. And it really does promote involvement, and it acknowledges the strengths that are in the group. And let me get into a little bit more detail around that. So with the review and the overview, there's a number of steps here. Now, I have a few little videos. I can't show you all the steps of ropes because I would need probably an hour and a half to 2 hours to really get into that. But I'll give you a little sampling, and I hope that you're able to see it. And I understand to hear it, though, it doesn't come through the phone. You may have to like sort of increase the volume in your computer to hear it. So we'll see how it works. I'm not sure how this is all, but every time I try to do a little mini like video, I often have problems with it. But in any event, that won't be critical, right? You'll still get the point, even if we don't see, I'm not able to do a show. I really wanted to do a show with you to kind of demonstrate what I meant. Okay, so in the review, can we just go to I just want to go back one step. Okay, here we go. All right, I have my team coordinating these videos. All right, so the beginning. You want to review the important points from the previous lesson. It's a simple question. Okay, last week we focused on kind of understanding the role of medication in helping individuals. And so can anyone tell me or remember, like, what was the main point from, like, last week? What was the takeaway for you? What is it that you kind of still, you know, kind of remember from our group last week? And that's a review. That helps to promote the continuity. It also gives you an idea of whether or not people have understood and been able to retain the information. So you always want to get feedback on how any of your groups are really, like, you know, functioning. So that's one piece. The other is a review of action steps. What I mean by that is a really good group does include, as I mentioned in ropes, an opportunity for people to think about and plan what they can do as and take an action based on what they have learned during the group. That's like really important. So you would offer that, and then when in the subsequent group, you would ask, gee, last week we were talking about, you know, medication, and one of the activities we had is, were there 2 or 3 questions you guys had about medication that was never answered? Remember when we were doing that, and one of the things that we talked about is if you had the opportunity to ask one or more of the questions that you wanted an answer to around medication, either by speaking to a nurse, speaking to your doctor if you had that opportunity, you're going online to gather more information, speaking to your counselor about it. But you know, you could have gone a number of ways, but the idea, the action step was, I have a question and I want to get it answered. And that was my action step. So I would ask, did anybody get a chance to actually you know, ask that question and get more information around a medication-related concern that you had? And maybe nobody has. You say, okay, it sounds like people didn't get a chance. Just remember, if you find that if you don't get a chance this week, perhaps in the future, you may get an opportunity. And please let us know that when you come in. We'd all be very happy to know if you were able to actually identify an important question and get the answer to that. That's just a simple example. I'm just giving you one little example of how an action step could be formulated. And you'd always want to just check in. So if you had a group where the end of that group included an opportunity for people to take an action step, then following up on the following week is important. If nobody did it, this is not an opportunity to say, why didn't anybody do their homework? If we get completely out of this idea that you are instructing people what they should do. But what you're doing is offering them an opportunity, right, to gather some information, to discuss it in the group, and to think about and consider whether they would like to learn more about this or put in action a particular strategy that is aligned with the theme of the group that they are concerned about. That is not up to you. That's up to the client. But what you have done, which is incredibly important, is you've given them some background information related to the topic. You gave them an opportunity to identify how they connected to this topic in their own personal way. You gave them an opportunity to think about how they could apply this in their own lives, and then offered them the chance to share that in a subsequent meeting. That's huge. That is big. So this is not about, you know, I was a high school teacher in a former life before I became a psychologist. It's very different than me giving homework to my students and then checking on their homework. And then, you know, it would be kind of get penalized if you didn't do it. That has to be removed completely from the group. You don't want anybody avoiding coming to a group because they feel they're going to be hassled if they didn't actually complete an action step. So creating that very safe environment. You're not here to get people to do something they don't want to do. You're here to offer an opportunity for people to grow. That's a philosophy that I hold on to, and I'm, you know, at least that's what I'm going to promote in my, that's based on my experience. The other part of the review is when you're going into a new topic is to review the participants' current knowledge of and experience of the current topic. That, in other words, you're not, let me put it another way. You're giving the group an opportunity to show off. You're giving people an opportunity to share their strengths. And if they have any knowledge in this topic or they have any experience with this topic, it's a great opportunity for you to then reinforce that knowledge and that strength. And I think that's very powerful. Many group leaders don't do it. I think it's a mistake. And when I have done that, lo and behold, people begin to, they know I'm going to be asking the question, so they read ahead or they gather information about the upcoming topic. So when I ask, does anybody have any knowledge, everybody's hands go up. I think that's fantastic. And it's a way of reinforcing and say, Joe, you hit it right on the head. Mary and Fred, yeah, that's exactly it. That's very strong and powerful when you reinforce people's strengths, particularly for individuals who oftentimes may have forgotten that they have some strengths. And I think it's our job to give them every opportunity to express that. So that's the review of their knowledge. And then the review of their understanding of why is this even important. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the role of medication in helping people who have some emotional, you know, challenges. Or we're going to be talking about ways of coping with difficult situations in life. Or we're going to be talking about ways of communicating that we can establish friendships. You know, whatever the topic happens to be. But asking individuals, so why is this important? Getting people to share, well, it's important because if you make friends, you know, you can have more support in your life, or you can do things together, or if you're having problems, you can have someone to talk to. I mean, 100 reasons why making friends is important and can be helpful. But you want that to come from the group. That's a very motivating strategy for individuals. That helps to prepare and orient learners. I get frustrated when I'm in groups, and people who have trained who kind of like, they kind of skim over that and kind of jump to the topic. It's a very common thing. So I'm getting a little stronger with trying to emphasize this piece, and anyway, that's why I'm doing it now. So, and then the O is the overview, is to let folks know in a group what to expect. That's very powerful as well. It calms everybody down. Everybody knows what's going to go on. The worst is when individuals go into a group and saying, I wonder if we're going to have that meandering group again, or they're going to pick on me with that individual therapy, or is the group leader going to just sermonize and lecture us? You know, when you go into a group and you don't know what's expected, you raise the anxiety. We want to lower anxiety. Okay. So here we got a video that this was done at Hudson River Psychiatric Center. One of my colleagues, Dr. Margulies, who was running a real group with real clients, and demonstrating a review of the, I'm emphasizing that part where before you introduce a new topic, you try to elicit from the group members what their understanding is of that topic. So were you able to run that, Brianna?
And let's do maybe just a quick review so Gene and I have a sense whether you've had experience learning about positive and negative thinking in another group or an individual work or anywhere. Anybody have experience with that?
Yeah, positive mental attitude and an approach to your mental illness with an outlook that is beneficial in the future. We study the fact that the way you think has a lot to do with the way you act.
Yeah. And so really the connection here is thinking really affects how what we're doing.
Okay. So that's just a brief kind of review. This was based on the Wellness Self-Management Program. But again, very simple kind of thing, reaching out to folks, asking, does anyone have, the topic here was positive and negative thinking, understanding, what that is and why it's important. And the first question is really, what do people know about this? And when they do have some information, you have such a, the power of reinforcement. Don't be surprised if that begins to increase in your group, which is fantastic. When people, want to learn more about it, they know the upcoming group, and they read ahead, and they come prepared to answer that question. That's great. People, that really does promote a very strong motivation around learning. So then the next slide, let's see if I can get this one. This is about the overview, and let's see if we can have a little. This is just telling folks. You're going to see my colleague, Dr. Margulies, do this with the group, just to give you a little bit of a visual.
Tony, before I play the video, do you mind muting your phone? I'm getting some feedback from the audience that they're getting feedback from the video.
Sure. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we've lost the visual on that, but you can see what Dr. Margulies mentioned, right? He said, why would that be important for us to learn about positive and negative thinking? And in my recollection of this group, there's about 3 people who were able to say, it's important, to know about the way you think, and if you're thinking in a wrong way or in a negative way, it can make you feel upset. Those are some of the things that I remember. So, eliciting that from the group, I think is just very, very important. Now we have is there the overview? Brianna, do we have an overview video?
Yes, the video follows this slide.
Okay, let's see. All right. Okay, let's see if we can get the overview.
Let me give you a quick overview of how we're going to spend the rest of the time, okay? We're going to spend some time on looking at what we call important information. And that's information that will be about the positive and negative thinking and how it affects us. Then we're going to do a quick whiteboard sheet. That'll give you a chance to kind of think through, what does this really have to do with me? And then finally, we'll give you on page 9. And then finally, we'll give you a chance to think about an action step that you might want to do between now and next time. So that's kind of how we're going to spend, the next 45 minutes or so.
Okay, so clearly what you can see is Dr. Margulies demonstrating how you would just let the group know what's going on. It just reduces anxiety. You don't want folks worrying, being uncertain. And when you're working with individuals who may be struggling with mental health or substance use issues, that's even more important. And being very transparent. The other thing it communicates is this group leader knows what he or she is doing. They've come in with a plan. They're not flying by the seat of their pants, which Dr. Salerno, unfortunately, was doing too much of the time when I was running mostly these more process-oriented types of groups. So I think that this is an important issue, and so I wanted to share that with you. So far you get a sense of, okay, you should do a review, then you do an overview, and now you get into the material itself, whatever the topic is. And all I want to share with you around this, because trying to show demonstrations in this area would take me like another 45 minutes. But the important part is that you have main points, right? That you have important information that you want people to learn. And it's great if they read it out loud, that you have actually either a handout or a brochure or some written material of some sort where people get a chance to learn, read out loud, if they feel comfortable doing that, around what is this topic and why is it important. That's what basic information really comes down to. And really think about both of those elements. Then giving people an opportunity to show and to act on what you're showing. And the acting on it really is a way of personalizing it. So if you give somebody a personalized worksheet of some sort and you ask them, listen, today's topic is about ways of coping, right, with stress. And you gave them a checklist of maybe 10 or 15 ways that people can cope that can cause more harm than good, or ways of coping that would cause more good than harm. And you ask people to kind of think it through. Think about your ways of coping. And you're giving them that kind of checklist, and they go through it, or they just keep it in mind. And then, so that everyone is going to have a different checklist. That's the personalizing it. And if you're asking, okay, who would like to share like one of their coping strategies that they think really works for them really well, and also might want to share a coping strategy that when you think about it may be causing you more harm than good. And having a discussion about that, that's personalizing it. The auditor from Medicaid or an insurance company says, okay, I get it. Each of my clients who we're paying for, each of the beneficiaries here is having an opportunity, everybody to learn something. Now they have an opportunity to identify their strengths and some of the challenges that they have. And then they'll hear you going on besides discussion points. Well, now think about an area that you would like to improve. Think about one of the coping strategies that you might want to change. And then think about how you might go about doing that. And some of the things might be, you know, I'm going to bring it up in my individual session. Or I'm going to learn a little bit more. I'm going to reread this material so that I understand this topic a little bit more. I'm going to talk to some friends and people that I trust about how I try to cope with it. I'm going to ask people, gee, when you're feeling like stressed out, you know what I usually do? I have to just tune out everybody. I just put a headphone on and I walk away. But sometimes I feel stupid when I do that. What do you do when you feel stressed out? That's something I'll do. My action step is to ask other people how they handle times when they're feeling really stressed out. Those are all action steps. That's what human beings do as part of like improving their lives. So if you have that kind of structured, then you have a very strong presentation and exercise. That's the sort of the heart of the learning process. But you've prepared people, you've motivated folks, you get into it, and now you want to summarize it, right? So the exercise, let me tell you a little bit more about that, is an invitation to participants to continue their learning, apply their learning between meetings. So it's a twist on homework, right? Not required, not given by you, the teacher. The person chooses to give themselves an assignment. Its high value is placed on identifying areas of interest and using it to set the agenda. So what have you done with this process? You want people to assess their strengths and areas that they want to improve. The strengths assessment is fantastic because many times people don't have an opportunity. They forget about their strengths. They've lost sight of what their strengths are. And oftentimes we don't emphasize it enough. So creating that kind of opportunity for people to know where their strengths are in the topic and areas that they'd like to improve, not weaknesses, areas they want to improve, and then helping them to think through, you know, what you can do in order to address that. Well, that's big. And now you have a group that really seems to be focused on helping individuals to improve their lives. Let me go to the next one, the summary, how to end a group. So the S is the summary. So what is it? It's a very quick review of the material, and it's important because it reinforces learning and assesses the participants' understanding and gathers important information from you. So you don't summarize by saying, I'll see you next week. The summary would be something like, okay, now that we have about 5 minutes left, a few minutes left, let's kind of step back a little bit and think about what were the main points that people got from today's lesson, or today's topic, whatever it might be. So what were the main points? I think I may have that on the next slide. Let me first show you the video, and then I'll get into a little bit more about the importance of summarizing a group in the following way. Okay, Brianna, if you're able to bring that up.
Yep, can you mute your phone again?
I'll mute myself. I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you.
Right. So this, again, a very, very brief. This is not a very complicated process and framework. That's what I think I appreciate most about it. And I probably trained over, I don't know, 1,100 people in New York State and several hundred people in other states or more in the use of a ropes format. And almost universally, people say, sometimes people make their own twist to things. God bless. This is not to be prescriptive at all, but just to share a framework. And you might want to put your own kind of unique signature on it based on your, your philosophy of treatment, based upon your experiences, based upon your knowledge of the population that you're working with. Fantastic. We just wanted to share with you, sort of a framework that you could consider and see if it really sort of like works for you, or certain elements would really work for you. And we wanted to, kind of share that with you. And in the summary piece, which is really pretty important, let me see, I just want to try to get to, I don't know if I put down, let me just see, hold on a second. Okay. The idea of, first, what were the main points? What are the takeaway? And you're listening really closely. What do people really get from this? And also gives you an idea of whether this is an effective group. And also then, you're able to reinforce any positive observation of yours. I don't want to underestimate the power of reinforcement. Not praise, but reinforcement. And what do I mean by that? Praise is sort of like, gee, you guys were a really good group today. Really thought you guys did great. That's fine. It's positive. People like to hear that. But reinforcement requires more specificity. You would have to say things like, John, I want to just appreciate that you, John and Mary, you guys were volunteered to speak, to read for us today. That was so helpful. You really contributed to the group. Fred, I noticed that you were helping out, Sebastian, when it comes to like that worksheet piece that, sometimes we just help each other out around that, and I thought that was terrific. I also want to say, all of you, we stayed on task today. And I thought that was really, terrific. And Betsy, I know that you were kind of helpful in that, kind of getting us to kind of stay on task. And Joe, your response to that opening question that we had, I think really got us onto a great start. You see what I'm saying? So part of a group facilitator's skill and focus ought to be on recording in your head every positive interaction that you saw and feeding that back to folks at the end. Don't be surprised that all of those positive observations will increase. I can almost guarantee it that it will increase, so that whenever you reinforce behavior that promotes the work of the group, you'll see more and more and more of it. And you don't want to take that away, and that's the summary does that. And that's a very important part of the summary. That's why I say the summary is not like, we'll see you next week. But you use that as a very powerful intervention, because people really want to know, like, so what did you think went well today, right? If you say the group was really good, well, what did that mean? What was good about it? So being able to be specific is a powerful strategy on your part. The other, of course, is getting feedback from folks. Like, so did this make sense today? Was it worth our time and effort to focus on this topic? Was this topic, like, relevant? Do you think there was something that we could have done a little bit differently around this topic? So that's the idea of respecting the group and respecting their experience, and also that they have a role in shaping what we do and shaping the group. And you get that by every group ends with getting some basic feedback. Was this useful? Was this helpful? Was this understandable? Was this relevant? Right? Is this a topic that you wish we could spend more time on, or you think it's really something we could have probably done without? Getting that kind of feedback is like really very important. So essentially, that's it. And you know, I do want to say that, of course, in groups, there are a bunch of skills that you use, right? Now, in wellness, this is just an example. In wellness and in other curriculum-based programs, one of the things that if you're looking into the wellness or other curriculum-based programs, is where the core competencies is embedded in the material itself. And the kinds of skills that help people facilitate groups I just wanted to share this with you. So you're learning about ropes and all, but there are core competencies that are sort of foundational for individuals to implement ropes effectively. So connecting and motivational skills, learning about teaching techniques. You know, I was a high school teacher, and I certainly had to learn various teaching and educational approaches, but we in our field as a psychologist, I never did, which was really odd because we spend so much time in the role of educating, and then some of the basic cognitive behavioral strategies, and then integrating them into the group. So I'm going to end at this point because what I really want to emphasize is the area of ropes. We have only maybe a couple of minutes. Any questions that folks have? I know we're going to run out of time, but if you want to, you know, sort of submit some questions, I'll be happy to get back to you guys with responses to that. But we could probably take one question if someone would like to ask it. And Diana, do you know if any questions are being typed in?
Yes, Tony, we do have a question that came in. I know in the interest of time, we don't have that much time for questions, but I did want to get to some of the questions. One of the ones that we have here is, how can we get leadership and upper management buy-in and support for utilizing or for seeing the usefulness of ropes?
Well, here's my experience with it. Typically, if you're a group facilitator, you don't need permission from higher-ups to organize your group. Typically, that's not the case. What I've heard certainly in my in the past has been, you know, how do I get my organization to expand groups, right, or introduce groups? But when it comes to the use of a particular framework, typically that's really within the purview of the group facilitator. So if you're running a group right now, you're using a particular, maybe you have a framework in mind or a philosophy, et cetera. But if you're, so if that's your group, that tends to be your place, right? That's like your arena. And if you choose to introduce some of the ropes approach. Now, I'm very happy to the person who asked that question, if you want to send like a direct email to me, because that's an unusual question to get. So I want to learn a little bit more about why that might require leadership support, and I'm more than happy to correspond with an email or even a call if that would be helpful to you. So here's my, it's anthony.salerno@nyu.edu. Please send me that question, because that's, again, in my experience, it's an unusual question around, you know, whether, like, who cares what kind of group method. I've never been asked that with any program I've ever run in the last 35 years. But there may be something unique about that, and I want to be respectful to that. So please contact me directly. And others who have questions, you can contact me directly around anything related to ropes. Happy to respond to you. This is a labor of love for me. I appreciate how hard people work in running groups, how hard I worked and my colleagues, and the need to develop group facilitation frameworks that are easy to learn, make a lot of sense, increases your confidence and the benefit to the clients. And that's a very high priority of mine, and I'll be happy to help in any way I can. So I know we're out of time, so I just want to thank everybody. Is there anything else, Diana, we have to say?
Not necessarily, but I know we definitely have run over time. Just wanted to get one question in there, Tony, if possible. We got a question from someone that said, how can I apply this to an individualized setting as well? There are some great ideas coming in as a result of this webinar, but it seems to be maybe a focus on individualized setting as well as possible with
Oh, yeah. No, you can definitely use this in an individual. I should have said that because I didn't think – originally we would develop it for groups, but when I was doing training with folks, some people said, you know, Tony, I want to use a structured curriculum, the one that I had worked on, but we don't have groups here, and I'd like to be able to use it in an individual. How would I do that? I think it really, in a way, it would be instead of going sequentially, right, you can just choose a topic. So if you have whatever the topic might be, if you already have a handout or you get a hold of materials, you can go to SAMHSA and get materials on illness management and recovery, all free. There'll probably be like 70 handouts on all mental health and or substance use related types of topics. You can get free copies of the Wellness Self-Management, which is 57 lessons covering many, many different topics. So you could literally introduce that as like a handout in an individual session, and you do it the same way. You would go through ropes. If they had an individual client, if you were my client, I'd say, and I have a handout, let's say, on managing stress, I'd say, you know, Joe, we've been talking a lot about stress, and I have some thoughts on how we can kind of get more deeply into this area. But here, I want to show you here. Let me give you the handout, and I have a handout. That here, what is it that you already know about this whole topic? What comes to mind for you? And why do you think it would be important for us to zero in on that? You know, we've been kind of talking about it, but do you think it would be important, and in what way would it make life different for you? How would things change for you if you're able to manage stress a little bit better? Those are all ropes questions. Those are review questions. So let me give you an idea, Joe, of what we can do here. We can kind of go through this material. Let me show you what it includes. There's a beginning, middle, and end here. And the whole point of this is to see if we can get a little further on figuring out steps you could take that you can apply some of these strategies in your own life. So do you think that would make sense to you? So Joe says, okay. So okay, and then you get into it, and then you just do the entire ropes approach, and you do it with an individual. I'm glad that question came up, and I have certainly seen people that I have trained who've told me that they've applied it individual, and it's worked very nicely.
Great, Tony. And actually, can you repeat that reference that you mentioned from SAMHSA, please?
SAMHSA, if you just, I'd Google the following. I just Google illness management and recovery. That's one of the evidence-based practices for adults with mental health problems and or substance use. You'll be able to download, there must be like 50 handouts. For the Wellness Self-Management, you can get all that material electronically for free if you go to practiceinnovations.org. So that's practiceinnovations.org. And the other one was just put Google in illness management and recovery, and it'll come up very quickly. And you'll have, you know, tons of different topic areas, and you can use the ropes format no matter what kind of handout you have, individually as well as the groups, of course.
Great. Thank you so much, Tony. So I do want to take this time. I do recognize that we are over in terms of our time, but I do want to thank you again, Tony, and thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. If you have any questions, you can certainly contact us at ctag.info@nyu.edu. And once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation. We appreciate if you complete that and provide your feedback. Lastly, we have information for our fourth and final offering from our series, Creating Successful Group Experiences, on July 13th. We certainly hope you will join us for this. And on behalf of McSilver, CTAC, and MIGTAC, and our presenter today, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of the day.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.